Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you might be in the world. Welcome to our Findings Show. My name is Mir+.
I'm Harrison Bell.
And today we have a very special episode for you because today's guest is Professor of Marketing at NYU Stern School of Business, but he's really just a guy that understands people and, hooper, if you ask me. Today's guest is Jared Watson. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, for sure. So, we talked a little bit earlier, but just so we can explain to our viewers, our podcast is kind of about understanding how impressive people got to where they are, and we think that you're a very impressive person, so we would love to just hear your journey, and maybe you can kind of start with kind of how you got to this room exactly.
Yeah, sure.
How you got to this chair.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I listened to one of your episodes and you said like I'd love to have Scott Galloway, I'd love to have LeBron James.
Yes.
And it's like, I play a little basketball, I am a marketing professor. I'm not either of those guys, but somewhere in the middle.
That's right. Yes. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. So how did I get here? Man, ever since I was little, I was fascinated by money. There's stories from childhood where it was like, basic addition wasn't my thing, but if you said it was in dollars and cents, I could do 3-digit numbers from like the age of 3, right? And so always funny. super into like dollars and cents, money. Really, it was trying to understand like how people's lives were dictated by like these little pieces of paper, right? So you think as a child, you're just like, why are people working hard doing everything for this paper? Right. This is crazy. So kind of fast forward, getting into college, I was a marketing major, like still had that keen interest in that space. Thought I'd eventually be the CMO of a Fortune 500 company. And I knew there were steps to get there, right? So undergrad marketing major, I went to work for PepsiCo as a sales manager, all with the understanding of like, I'll go back and get my MBA in a few years. And so while I was at PepsiCo, I realized that career path wasn't right for me. Like it didn't let me flex the intellectual muscles that I was hoping it would. And I was like, well, that's fine. I'm going to go back to grad school anyway. Had the chance to go hang out with my brother-in-law at a top business program. And I was like, I don't know that this is actually kind of the environment I'm looking for either. And I think, everybody's different. Everybody has different interests and preferences. And so I was a little bit like, all right, where am I headed in life? Where am I headed in the world? And a sheer chance encounter with an old professor. Like I was actually headed to a UW basketball game, and I stopped at the store to get some gum, and I ran into an old professor. And so she and I were catching up, and she was like, hey, if you're serious about like not being satisfied in work and trying to understand why people are doing what they're doing, you should think about a PhD. And I was like, man, I'm, a first generation college student. What's a PhD in business even mean? And so she and I started having regular meetings. I realized like, that's what I want to do. So that led me to the East Coast. So I went to Maryland and got my PhD under like one of the foremost persuasion experts in the world. And then from there, NYU hired me, and they've kept me stuck on the East Coast ever since.
I see where you got that persuasion piece in your recent AI article about kind of the anthropomorphism and persuasion of the factors that play into AI, which that was interesting. It's obviously a big topic these days. Continue on. So that brought me to Stern, right? Academic job market's like not all that different from the industry job market outside of it being much, much smaller. And so, I applied for jobs. I interviewed here. I had offers kind of scattered across the country, but there's only one NYU, and it was like, all right, let's do this.
Yes. Yeah. So what about your job at PepsiCo? Did you feel like you were unfulfilled? What was the emotion driving?
Yeah, totally. So I think, PepsiCo's a fantastic corporation. I have nothing but love for like my colleagues, for my peers, my employees that I managed. I just realized like, it's a functionally different occupation than I envisioned from a major corporation, right? And I think the biggest part of that was a lot of stuff is done because of inertia. Right. So it's like, this is how we've always done it. And it's seemed okay. So let's keep doing that. And there wasn't a lot of like challenging the mold and thinking about breaking outside of the box. And so for me, as you know, an outsider into a new industry, into a new company, there's a lot of opportunity where I say like, hey, why are we doing it this way? It seems like it would be more efficient to do it another way.
Right.
And the response was just like, hey, that's how we do it. And it's been fine for this long. And that was like kind of like the big challenge for me.
Yeah, I hear you. You know, I think a lot of students our age are also kind of trying to find their path as well. It seems like for you were trying to do that more at PepsiCo. You were still not exactly sure what you wanted to do marketing, but you weren't exactly
totally
fulfilled.
Yeah.
So we're 20, and I think a lot of our audience is also students and whatnot. So, you know, if you were 20 years old today and you were kind of struggling to find your calling, where would you go? Where would you point to? What are your first steps?
I mean, I think one thing you have to do is have a long-term orientation. So a lot of college students today, it's like you get here and you say, okay, how do I end up with the best job possible in 4 years? Right? But there's a couple challenges with that. The first off is like, what is the best job possible? Like you think you know what that job is, but just like I did with PepsiCo, it's like once you're there, it's a whole different ballgame. And so one thing you want to do is try to keep your options open. The other thing, you know, and I don't think people speak about this enough, is to try to understand what the purpose of college is, right? And so today, most people say college is an instrumental vehicle for me to get to this next phase of life. And what that means is like, I need the necessary certifications, I need the necessary skill set to acquire that specific job or that career path. But if you look at the historical perspective of college, right, it wasn't necessarily like training you directly for the workforce. It was teaching you a style of thought, right, to approach the world, right, trying to broaden your horizons, understand. Like I'm a big believer in Stoicism, right, and so I love reading like exactly. So reading these daily meditations from Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, right, and all of that's around like, all right, man, like let's step back and think about the big picture. Instead of thinking about where I want to be 4 years from now, think about where I want to be 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And once you do that, you're able to kind of abstract away from some of that stuff, right? Like big picture, if you're thinking where you want to be 30, 40 years from now, you're probably not just saying, I want to be the VP or CEO of this corporation. You might be saying like, I want to be a husband or a father. I want to be a wife. I want to be a loved one. I want to love and help others. And when you do that, you start to say like, how do I get there? And there's so many other pathways, right? But suddenly when you're in that mold of just like, how do I become a VP at a private equity firm? You're like, oh, it feels like there's really only one pathway to get there. And if I don't get my foot in the door at Goldman, then I'm really in trouble 4 years from now.
This is like dream guest type material. This is the question. These are essentially the questions that we've been trying to answer for the first 4 episodes of our show, effectively, because what we see here, I think this is, pertains specifically to NYU because it's so competitive.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's relatively difficult to get into. I've always wondered what has been this kind of almost generational change in thought about approaching college. Why has this occurred? Why do people get here freshman year and say, okay, 4 years from now, I want to be sitting instead of in this desk in Boaf's library, I want to be sitting at over on Jersey City and Goldman's investment banking desk. Why do you think this kind of almost failure has occurred?
Sure. I mean, there's so many factors that go into that. We can talk about some of those, right? But one is absolutely the exponential increase in the cost of education, right? And when that happens, like your risk profile increases. So when you're trying to say like, what is the value that's coming from this education, and the risk profile is hedged on the financial risk, now you're really focused on the financial benefits, right? But when you actually think about value, right, there's social value, there's temporal value, right? And so there's these other benefits and costs that we can focus on. But because I think the financial cost has increased so much, right? The focus on the financial benefit has increased quite a bit.
So the people lose track of that 30 to 40 year vision.
Exactly.
And they're stuck.
That's
in the
exactly
near
it. Yeah, that's
we're
exactly
guilty
it.
Of it.
We're
to an extent.
100%.
To an extent.
Totally.
So, how do you're talking about 30-year vision. What does doing well mean for you?
Yeah.
What's your outlook? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like, yes, I had that short-term vision of like, I'm going to be the CMO of a Fortune 500 company.
Yes.
But at the same time, for me, it was always like, I'm going to have a wife that I love with kids that I love, and they're going to have experiences that I never did, right? And so like, we're going to travel the world together. They're going to be speaking multiple foreign languages, and they're going to have, just a different mindset than I did growing up, which was very much like extrinsically motivated. How do I get the financial capital to live the life I want? I want them to say like, how do I get the social capital to live the life I want? How do I get the temporal capital to live the life I want? And so that's sort of where I am today, is like, I have a wife I love. I have 2 beautiful daughters that I love. And everything around it is that. So like, I love my job, right? Like being able to go up and work on research for questions that I find interesting is awesome. But it's still like, that gives me access to time, to money, to other resources to do these things in life that I care about, which is supporting my wife and kids.
Yeah. I think this is right up Harrison's alley. He's a big family guy. So it's for him, this is, you're speaking to him.
And you're not? Is that what you're saying?
No,
I
100% am. But I think Harrison.
Yes. Better not listen to this episode.
No, that's not exactly what I mean. But I think Harrison, he talks a lot about, I want to do this so that my family can kind of benefit. And I think that's kind of what you talk to, and that's it's interesting to hear that, because you don't hear this a lot from people that talk about success and whatnot. They always talk about getting more and more and more, getting more money, moving that goalpost away from the family into more extrinsic things. So that's pretty interesting. But when it comes to work and talent and success, to you, do you think it comes from talent, timing, work ethic, or is it something else that we should be looking to?
It's a little bit of everything, right? And so I think what's key to try to understand is like, where are your strengths, and leverage those strengths. And at the same time, it's like, where are your weaknesses, and try to cultivate those skills to increase the floor on those weaknesses, right? So I know who I am as a researcher. I know like what my skill sets are. And as a function of that, like, I go into new research programs, right? New projects in new areas. And I say, this is what I'm going to cover, but I'm going to go assemble this incredible team that covers all of my weaknesses.
Okay.
Right? Instead of saying like, I need to go learn that skill set, it's more efficient for me to say like, I know the people with that skill set, right?
I like that.
That's really interesting.
And that specifically for me is like, that's one of my skill sets, is being able to delegate. Other people say, oh, I have this idea, let me take it on and let me learn that. And maybe they find that interesting and rewarding. I don't find that as rewarding personally, right?
Right.
And so, part of it is definitely that idea of like it is an art of delegation, right? And figuring out how to assemble the right team for the right problem.
Interesting. Yeah. I think we're hearing your success side a little bit and kind of what you think about that, which is awesome. I think we can move on to the research that you do, and I think that'll be pretty interesting to our listeners.
Definitely, yeah. Why don't you just speak to some kind of your focus on what you're, maybe I understood from here that you want to get your tenure here at NYU. And then, maybe pick up some more research. That's kind of your niche. Or, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So, high level, like, I want to be one of the world's foremost experts on online consumer behavior, right? And that's a broad sort of substantive domain. But it means like, I want to know why people are interacting with people on social media in different ways. I want to know why we look to influencers to buy products, why influencers can now be more trusted than product reviews. Okay. I want to know how platforms, right, how Amazon or Yelp or someone else can display that information to make it more digestible for the consumer and therefore more influential in our decisions.
Right.
Kind of across the board, right? I think big picture is like, I'm interested in these questions as we move towards a more digital economy. right? Like, how is that impacting humans on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. That's pretty interesting, actually. Yeah, and we know Harrison and I have read some of your research, but I think it's very important, that the audience does as well. It's super interesting stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're kind of influencers as well these days.
To a very small scale.
Niche
Incredibly niche
small
audience.
effect at the moment, but what are some tips that you can give us so that we can be more trustworthy in the eyes of our audience?
Sure. So the buzzword, not just in my research, but in a lot of people's research in this area is authenticity, right? And so we all have some idea of what it means to be authentic, but we're really just talking about like being yourself, right? Being true to who you are, because people can oftentimes suss out if you're not. At a more practical, sort of like concrete level of what authenticity means, right, is transparency. And so disclosing motivations behind why you're doing things makes a lot of sense, right? So if one day you're going to have sponsors for your podcast, and it's like, who are those sponsors and why are you allowing them to sponsor your podcast? And it might be like, hey, yeah, we don't really care about this company, but they're paying us a lot of money.
Right.
Or it could be like, hey, they're paying us a little bit of money, but there's a lot of synergy with like their clientele and ours. Right. And people go like, oh, okay, that works for me. So even if I don't like that you're promoting this brand, but you're explaining to me that you're doing it for the financial benefit, at least I can understand it,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And so I think yeah, authenticity is really key. Another thing that I found in some of my research that underscores this is like personal anecdotes, right? And so, telling your individualized stories, talking about historical things that you've encountered tends to be quite effective, especially early on. So, you guys are in the first, whatever half dozen episodes of your podcast, doing a lot of like I, me, my perspective, here's how I feel. That's fantastic. A year from now, maybe that's less impactful because people are like, hey, we know you. And now it feels a little self-absorbed to just hear you keep talking about yourself. But yeah, we found in some research, basically around the 9-month mark of someone following a Twitter influencer, the usage of first person pronouns starts to backfire. But for those first 9 months, it increases engagement.
Did you ever figure out why it backfires? That use? So
the intuition behind what we're doing. So this is like a purely econometric statistical model. So we don't have like psychology measures. We've scraped Twitter and we've looked at engagement. We've done linguistic analysis. The intuition behind what happens is early on, self-disclosure is fantastic because it helps me understand who you are. Right. We love when someone is being vulnerable and open and we're learning these unique details about them. And it starts to cultivate something called a parasocial relationship with influencers, right? These one-sided relationships. It's like how we feel like we know celebrities, but they've never seen us. They wouldn't know who we are just based on the comments because they get thousands or millions of them. But over time, right, when that influencer isn't able to reciprocate to us, right? They're not able to respond to our comments. They're not able to update their content based on our stated preferences. Then yeah, we look and we go, man, that's really self-absorbed for you to just keep talking about how you feel, the issues you're facing, etc. And so yeah, while it works really well initially, at some point there's this inflection point of people saying like, that's enough because now it doesn't feel equal anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. I think being online for our generation is what you're saying is it's important the research that you do because more of our generation is increasing online all the time.
Right.
We're talking about 24 hours a day, just all the time that you're awake, the shower, whatever else. What do you think about this kind of addiction to cell phones? And is it okay that we're being manipulated by these companies in these certain ways? Yeah.
I mean, so I think there's like several facets to that question. And so one of them is like the evolution of technology, right? Like the rapid proliferation of our usage of technology has fundamentally made life different today than it has before for our parents' generation or grandparents' generation. And so one of the challenges we face is this shifting of the goalposts of like what we think is healthy and not healthy. And so it's easy to look today and say, like, oh, you shouldn't be online more than X hours because there's research that says more than that there's a negative consequence to mental health. And I think that can very well be true, but I think we also have to understand the counterfactual of that, which is like, who are those people that aren't online that often? Okay. And what does it mean to have this sort of negative linear effect over time of mental health? And is it just are we picking up a correlation with internet usage, or are we showing a causal relationship with internet usage? So like one of the things I kind of struggle with now is I have a 6-year-old daughter, and it's like, I don't know what age I'm going to give her a cell phone. Right. And so part of it's like, yeah, I don't want to give her a cell phone until she goes off to college. But if she doesn't have a cell phone in high school, is she going to be a pariah?
Hurts you
right?
a little bit too.
It might hurt me, right?
Yeah, right?
But it's like, yeah, so is she going to be made fun of if she's not on social media?
Right.
And okay, so high school, great. What about middle school? What about elementary school? Right. And so there's this thing of like, hey, the world is changing. We don't know how it's changing. Some of that we have to take on a day by day basis. And that's when it just comes to general technology usage. I don't think we can just say technology's bad, using the internet too much is bad.
That's an interesting point, because I've always wondered, whenever I've heard that, is it that screen time is bad? Is it looking at the screen is bad? Or is it the social media aspect that harms us? That is really, toxic in a way. For there are obviously a million reasons as to why social media can be toxic.
Yeah.
But what do you think is the predominant one? That really
I mean, I think, again, there's two, right? So one of them is that and this is this is something we're seeing, especially so in the college age. Like I can talk about this a little bit more if you want, but we're losing our creative abilities, right? And a part of that comes from losing the ability to be bored. Right. So having constant stimulation doesn't allow us to use our imagination like it once did. And I think that's probably a bigger challenge than some of the social influence things that are happening. But there are absolutely many cases of social comparison and how that's impacting people's mental health.
Especially young women.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That I've always wondered about that because I constantly hear this narrative that's, gosh, screens are bad. Why are screens bad?
Yeah.
And obviously we can't go back now. We can't go back. Too much has been almost, things are more efficient now, no question. But
I like your idea about not being bored. I think that's something that I kind of try to.
He's definitely put a lot of thought into this.
Yeah. So I've been trying to get off the phones a lot, and I feel like I'm addicted in some ways. I used to be addicted to phones. It was something that was very instinctual to me. It was not. I wasn't on my phone because I needed to see something in particular, but it was just a habit.
Yeah.
And that's where I was kind of falling into the trap of not being bored. I felt like I wasn't as creative, maybe wasn't as motivated to do certain things. And I feel like some of your research that has to do with behavior and how to get more people engaged with certain material. I think that it's very important in the business side, but it also, in some ways affects us in a certain way because we become more addicted to these things, I guess. I don't mean to say that, anything is, particularly bad or whatnot.
No, but I mean, I think, I think so that's the second part of your question, which is like, hey, what's the deal with these companies manipulating us and everything else? And it's like, yeah, right. Like, absolutely. There's a lot of bad things that can happen through the lens of marketing. There are good things too. And so, what's more important, I think, is that we have appropriate regulation that can help curtail some of those negative things and can help bolster some of those positives. I think one of the things that I sort of talk about with my students is like, if you want a simple product, like say you want a blender, right? Like, what do you do today? It's like you go to Amazon, you search for blender, and up come a bunch of options. And pretty quickly, within like the first 2 or 3 options, you find one that's good enough, right? Like you can satisfy pretty quickly and say like, yeah, that Black & Decker or that Cuisinart $30 blender does what I need it to. Imagine being in a physical store with that same assortment of products, right? So walking into Best Buy and them saying like, hey, we have 1,000 different blenders for you. And oh, by the way, like there are no reviews for these products. Like
Yes.
you go figure out which one you want.
That,
Right.
that review piece too. I didn't even think about that on Amazon. You don't have that in the store.
Right.
You don't have it.
And so, the big challenge you then have is like, okay, that's a waste of time to sort through all of those options when Amazon's algorithm, is it manipulating us? Sure. Is it making our search like way easier? Yeah, probably.
I see what you're saying. I see what
right?
you're saying. Yeah.
And so there are these benefits that come from a lot of this as well that aren't necessarily realized. But, things don't have to be zero sum. Like companies can leverage algorithms to make more money. But when it comes to like customer lifetime value, the best outcome is for them to get you as a recurring customer, which means that they satisfy you. Right.
And Amazon can't do that as effectively with those, like just a simple Amazon search. You're not likely to pick the same. Actually, you probably are likely to pick the same, brand that you see that you're so loyal to. Like, for example, NutriBullet. To go to the case of the blender, when I see NutriBullet, I kind of see kind of a sleek, modern-looking product. So whenever I go to the store or on Amazon, I'll think, okay, well, maybe I stick to NutriBullet. I've had a couple of their products in the past. That's intentional.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, I think that's the whole idea of branding is basically to say like we can convey credibility with name alone. Right. So like one of the fun things I talk about, like one of my classes with students is brand extensions. And you say like, when do things like work and when do they not? And I show them an infographic of Mr. Clean, like so the cleaning.
What's a brand extension?
Yeah. So like when we think about the cleaning product, Mr. Clean, right? So like a floor scrubbing product. You go, okay, that's the core product. And now it's like, okay, what about a specific Mr. Clean toilet bowl cleaner? Like, yeah, that tracks for me. That makes a lot of sense. All right, what about a Mr. Clean disinfectant wipes? Cool, that works for me. What about a Mr. Clean car wash? Yeah, that still kind of works, right? Like that seems to make sense. That works. That's a great brand extension. That's something Mr. Clean has done. They have car washes. On the flip side, when you think of Colgate, right, you think of toothpaste, right? One of the I'd say like most infamous like brand extension flops is that Colgate moved into microwave meals. Right?
Really?
And you're like, that one doesn't track, right?
No,
like,
What about a Mr. Clean cell phone?
Right? Yeah, Mr. Clean cell phone is like, okay, that doesn't say anything
right
about technology.
That doesn't seem right to me.
Right? And so I think like that's the idea is like brand extensions are great because they can convey instant credibility in relevant domains. Not so good when you're moving into these domains that you don't have domain, right? You don't have established expertise in.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think kind of going back also to your manipulation piece, which connects, I think companies have been manipulating their consumers for forever. That's kind of the whole point is you try to sell your product.
Sure.
But your research is actually putting some, human behavior and actual data backing to it, which is super interesting, actually. I think we want to move on to some rapid fire questions. Sure. If you're cool with it. I think Harrison and I'll start it off and we'll go alternate the questions.
Sure.
And just give a few words. We'll just go quick. So number one is the hype around Stern real?
Yes.
Okay. Number two, for you, this is it pertains to you in particular. As an investment, stocks or real estate?
Stocks, long term.
Long term. Okay.
Tariffs, good or bad?
Bad. Favorite
NBA team?
Historically, the Mavericks, but I'm having a tough time loving them right now.
I think they'll be pretty good next year, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yes. One word to describe Gen Z.
Gen Z. I'd say authentic.
Do you wake up every day and you feel happy?
Yes.
Does your major matter?
Undergrad major matters less than grad school major.
AI, helpful or evil?
Helpful.
Greatest business mind of all time.
Ooh, greatest business mind of all time. I say Steve Jobs, and I don't know why.
Okay.
Maybe his branding got to you.
Exactly.
One thing you want to accomplish in your career?
In my career, one thing I want to accomplish, I want to publish in every one of the major marketing journals.
What's one major marketing journal?
Marketing Science, which I've done now. But yeah, that's one. Journal of Consumer Research, which I've also now done, is another one of ours. But we have 4 core journals, and then we have
pretty scholarly, or are they more available to?
Extremely scholarly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say. I was gonna maybe a good bedtime read, but maybe not for a guy like me.
Yeah, some of them in Journal of Consumer Research would be fine. Marketing Science is like a quant journal. Got it.
Okay.
So if you're like an econometrics person, then maybe.
Okay.
Gotcha. Favorite restaurant in New York City?
Ooh, favorite restaurant in New York City. Lupa for Italian, Shuka for Mediterranean.
Shuka is very good, actually.
Yeah.
Have you had it?
I have.
Okay,
That's
nice.
One topic that should not be taught in schools.
One topic that should not be taught in schools. I mean, I don't know that there's one that shouldn't be, right? So going back to the idea of like the purpose of college is for like training a way of thought, right? Like people should be critically thinking about, I think, anything, right? I think perspectives on those you could sort of avoid teaching. But I would say like the purpose of college is to learn, and part of that is having spirited debate and thought.
Nice. I like that answer. One topic that should be taught to everyone in school.
Yeah, one topic that should be taught to everyone. I think personal branding, right? So literally how you position yourself in the marketplace, whether that's for your job market, whether that's the dating market, whether that's for the social market, personal branding.
Well, we'll ask you some more after these rapid fire questions about this. That's super interesting.
All right. Do grades actually matter?
So grades are an indicator of something. The question is what that something is. And so grades matter to a certain extent. Right.
Interesting.
It's not important to have a 4.0. It's probably kind of important to have like a 3.0 or better.
Okay.
Right?
Does that correlate usually to? Actually, sorry, we're on rapid
Yeah,
fire.
yeah,
But
we can circle back.
Yeah, we'll circle back.
Okay.
That's an interesting one.
Junior year summer, startup or internship?
I think it goes back to long term what you want to do. I'd go for the startup route if I have the opportunity.
I like to hear that. Do you ever read any unsavory rate my professor comments?
Not for myself.
Good.
Okay.
I'm not surprised, honestly.
Best city to live in
America. Or in America or
anywhere.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I could pick up and move today, it would be Rome.
Okay.
Wow.
I think if we're talking like family vibes, maybe Vienna. But New York is up there. Even with little kids, New York is incredible.
Even with little kids. Okay.
But I see Europe as the common denominator here for the dream cities.
Great.
Nice.
Europe's great. Yeah.
Awesome.
I know you're and being from Seattle, do you have any allegiance to the West Coast anymore these days, or especially Pacific Northwest? The summers are real hard to beat.
Yeah, so I still spend my summers out there, but not anymore. I still love it. I still have family and friends, but every year, right, things change, and so some of that nostalgia is sort of worn off.
I hear you. We're from Portland ourselves, so we definitely kind of understand this
Rip
dynamic.
City.
Yeah,
Rip City. We're gonna be good next year on the playoff team.
Hopefully.
So tell me, about this grade thing. Circling back to that, understand if you get a 3.0 in college, let's say.
Sure.
Does that mean that you're going to have at least some kind of success in life, or at least you're more likely to have some kind of success than if you have below that necessarily? And I don't know what success is. Obviously, you can't really define it in a sit down like this. But 4.0 obviously doesn't matter in terms of
I mean,
return on investment. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's grades as an indicator of something, right? Like, what do grades indicate? And grades generally indicate your ability to encode and develop rote memorization, right? Read a book, understand what that book says, and repeat what that book says. It oftentimes it does very little to teach you about applying that stuff to things in the marketplace.
It's almost like college in general we can't retain everything we learn
Exactly.
in undergrad.
Exactly.
Right? So it's more about, like you talked about at the start, the core skills of what you're taking and applying that to.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think like that idea of like GPA. So, I mean, first off, there are some employers that absolutely are like, oh, we're only going to interview if you're above a 3.8, right? Or a 3.9 or whatever. Top of class, you've got to be X percentile. If that's your goal and your vision, then yeah, GPA 100% matters, right? But it's also important for you to take risks and understand, right, playing within the confines of the sandbox or even a little bit outside of it. And sometimes that means like you swung and you missed, and you got a C on that assignment instead of an A because you went in a totally wrong direction. Sometimes it's understanding, like some professors are like, hey, I love that you swung and you missed, but because you did that, you get an A. Okay. And others are like, hey, because you colored slightly outside of the lines, you fail. So there's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to like what the grade represents, how you get that grade. There's a lot of heterogeneity of like who's evaluating you and the criteria by which they evaluate. But in general, like grades are an indicator of you being able to read, memorize, and repeat something.
Interesting.
Huh.
That's honestly maybe the answer I hope to hear. Is that the answer you hope to hear?
Honestly, I would think so. The whole thing about applying the knowledge that you get that you learn in undergrad is what we're trying to basically figure out. Any tips on how to do that? What are some ways that you can actually apply what you learn?
Totally. So going back to this other thing about like, what do I hope you think college is, or what do I hope we can get college back to, right? And it's this place to teach people how to learn, how to think, how to be creative, right? Which we've kind of stripped out of things because of this instrumentality of a degree to get the job we want. I hope that what we can get back to is this entrepreneurial spirit in college, right? Wherever that may be, right? So as a history major, great. Go try a history podcast. Try writing a history blog. Try doing something, right, just to create value with that skill set, as opposed to doing that to get a grade to then go figure out what to do with that grade, right? And so that's what I'm kind of hoping people can slowly do. What does that mean practically for students? Look for classes that allow you to do that. Look for opportunities that allow you to do that. I always tell my students, like when I was an undergrad, I thought the nerdiest thing someone could do was to do a case competition in the business school.
Yes.
and then I had some friends that like convinced me to do a case competition with them right before I graduated. And I was like, this is the coolest thing.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I should have been doing case competitions as soon as I possibly could.
For sure.
Right. And I think that goes without saying, like, go spread your wings, try things like case competitions, go try that class that's not part of your major because you think it's going to be intellectually stimulating. Even if you think you're risk averse and you really don't want to start your own company, go take that entrepreneurship class just to get a different philosophy of approach to the workplace, right? So try to expand those horizons. Don't specialize too soon. I think those are all things that are within the control of you as students.
I think we tried one of those starting case competitions, didn't they?
Oh, we certainly did. didn't get into it.
They looked at us. They said, "What?"
Next time, guys. Next time. That's pretty interesting. Harrison and I, just to give you some background, is we have started some businesses together, and I'm not afraid to say it to any audiences. We failed a lot.
Sure.
So far, we started a drop shipping business. Failed completely. We spent all of our burger flipping money on that, and just we're broke. And then we started a real estate thing, and that didn't work out. And so, what's your attitude to failure? Is it okay to be guys like us, or do you? When does it get real?
When does it get real? It's time to give up, and it's time to go to the job, to the W-2.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think across. Well, so. Answering that second question's maybe a little bit easier, which is like when you can't take it anymore, right? Like what you need to do is consistently assess your outside option and say, do I think that this is better than where I am today, right? Or do I think it's worse? And should I keep going, right? Like I could have stayed at PepsiCo. I applied to PhD programs. I got rejected from every PhD program I applied to. And I said, great, I can either just stay where I am, or I can say like, nah, that grad school thing sounds a lot better. And I need to figure out how to make that work. And so that's what I did, right? Like I spent time, I volunteered at the local research lab to get the experience necessary to go to grad school. And so I think, what's important when you're talking about failures is it's only a failure if you're not learning from it, right? And moving you closer towards your goal. I keep a little card in my wallet from my mother from a newspaper from like 1950 something. And it says, so long as you're going in the right direction, you can never go too far. Right?
Oh, wow.
That's
very poetic.
Right? It is. Cool. And I think that's the true thing. So you say like, man, we tried this drop shipping thing and we failed. So what did we learn from that?
Yes.
Right. And you either learned like, oh yeah, drop shipping's the devil. We shouldn't try that anymore.
Yeah.
Or you learn like, oh, you know what? Like the drop shipping business has evolved and maybe we need to evolve with it. Right? If you don't learn anything, that's a true failure. And I'd say if you're consistently not learning anything, then it's like, yeah, maybe you should be looking for that W-2 route. But if you feel like you're learning and you're moving towards that goal and you can sustain that movement towards the goal at the pace that you're doing, then I think would say like, why not? Why not keep trying?
I feel that way about the real estate in particular. Okay. What was our biggest takeaway from
what was our biggest takeaway?
I'm not talking about like starting another real estate wholesaling company. I'm just talking about the entrepreneurial journey in general that we can kind of keep applying what we've learned.
So I mean, we definitely
we
definitely learned a lot from those failures. I think the biggest one of them is to first of all be better with our money. Number one is we had some marketing campaigns that didn't work and we didn't even need them necessarily. Number two is definitely be passionate about it. That's the biggest thing that we've taken away. Yep. And we love that you're talking about this right now, the 30, 40 year outlook of what do you actually want to do in life? What's your life's task? I think that's awesome. And I think that's what we were missing with all of our businesses, and something that we kind of started this podcast as just a fun thing to do, but also just something along that entrepreneurial self-starter type of arc. And I think that's what we love doing, is talking to people like you. So, and hopefully talking to more people like you in the future.
I think one thing we could have taken away is we didn't have almost enough risk in what we were doing. We didn't have a $250,000 loan that they're coming for that note to the bank. And if we had that, I think some things might have
some skin in the game.
Potentially.
And that's actually that's something
it's a good question that you ask, and I think we'll come back to it, and I'll fill you in, Jared, on what are some failures that we had.
Definitely.
There's one thing I want to add that I don't know the full backstory of this, but I think it's so interesting that we're on a podcast. But do you know the history of podcasts? Like, do you know how this kind of started?
We don't actually. I don't personally. Do you?
So it was basically a comedian, Tom Green, who would have people over to his house and he would record these conversations with his friends. And I think he released it on public access TV. And it was just a random, he's a comedian in LA. He's probably too old for you guys, but I remember Tom Green. And Joe Rogan was one of his, friends from the comedy circuit. And Joe Rogan was like, dude, you can monetize this.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And that's what led to Joe Rogan starting the Joe Rogan Experience, which is really kind of the first wave of commercialized podcasting. But it came from him looking and seeing what his friend was doing and saying there's a better way to do it. Right. And it's not competitive. It's a different thing. I'm doing a different thing than you. But wow, there's ways that we can evolve this thing that you're starting to do. So there's a lot of opportunity to look around and say we don't need to drop ship like everybody else. What does it look like to evolve drop shipping for the 21st century? Yeah. And that's what you're seeing now, I think, with the creators on TikTok, right? It's we're not even drop shipping. We're promoting products for the people who are drop shipping, and we're taking our 50% rip off of that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because we didn't take the road less traveled.
That's true.
We did, and that could have been our, the nail in the coffin, honestly. Yeah. If we had thought about how we can, take something that's obviously easier to get into. We need something. We can't go and raise a bunch of money for a product that we just designed. But if we had
I wouldn't say we can't. I think we
okay,
can.
sorry. Well,
personally,
we maybe could have, but we didn't two summers ago.
Continue.
We had taken that, applied that mindset of really just, doing it that more untraditional way. I think thinking about evolving and how wholesaling and how dropshipping could evolve, that would have been definitely a little bit more.
Yeah, and you think about
impactful.
Like one reason you didn't was like maybe you were lazy, maybe you didn't think about it. The others like maybe it felt too risky. And now you're like, hey, that business failed with a less risky attempt. Like what would have happened with a more risky? Like, you can only lose 100% of your money.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's a good point. And to your podcasting point, if I was a media executive, I would have never gone on this trend. I would have totally been lost in the past because I wouldn't think that so many people would listen to people having conversations with each other, but it actually took off. But I could have never predicted it personally. All right. Well, I think we have some good thoughts from you. Just some closing questions. What would you do if you weren't teaching? Is there something that what's your?
Yeah, I given what I know today, if I wasn't a professor, I think I'd be a lawyer.
Okay. Why is that?
I like sort of spirited debate. And so I think like law, where I could go in and like do my research, develop critical arguments, and go out and litigate. I'd probably be a litigator.
Nice. Awesome. Maybe next time we have you on the podcast, we'll do a hot debate next time.
Private or public sector?
I'm not that deep into it. I think I'd probably sadly, I wouldn't want to do things that I'd bring home.
Sure.
So I'd probably want to do more like corporate litigation.
That makes sense.
Right?
Actually, that's very, keeping that work-life balance.
Yeah, I think white collar crime stuff would be fun.
White collar crime.
Yeah.
Nice. What's something that you wish someone told you when you were 20? Someone like you.
Yeah. I think, it sounds corny, but like don't grow up too fast. So a lot of us are looking and we're literally like chasing graduation to start that career. And then it's like, oh man, I get 2 weeks of vacation. How exciting, right?
Yes.
Or as opposed to like, oh, I get the whole summer off as a student.
Right.
Or like, oh, as an entrepreneur, I can flex some of that. But like one of my biggest regrets to this day is I graduated undergrad in 3 years. And part of it was like, I'm racing. I have this job offer from Pepsi. I should jump on it. And I'm like, I should have just studied abroad for a year, right? Instead of racing through undergrad. So like take your time, truly see the world, listen to diverse perspectives, go see how other people live, and use that to shape kind of what you want in your 20, 30, 40-year life vision.
That's even worse now, isn't it? The people, that mindset, it's absolutely worse now in terms of people trying to race through,
exactly.
Like we talked about. I mean, that's a great piece of advice.
Yeah. Well,
next question.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. We were all students once, and you're one of those that never forgets that. Yeah. You were in our position, so we appreciate you being so open with us.
Very grateful.
And coming on, even though we're a small show. I think we were really appreciative of.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Thank you
anytime,
very much.
guys.
Very kind.
Thank you
so much.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.